Good morning. You can do better than that. Good morning. Well, when I walked in, it wasn't as packed as this, so you look really good. Well, let me just say that I'm not just speaking as an individual. I'm actually speaking as part of Saint in Hackney, St. John's in Hackney. So greetings from Saint and Al Gordon and the rest of the team. Has anyone been to Saint? Okay, we're going to get a better exchange program going, I think. But no, it's been an absolutely amazing opportunity to be here. I've been to Brighton so many times, and I've never felt that as warm welcome as this. And Greta and myself are really pleased to be here. So, and it's such a magnificent building. Yeah, I'm lost for words. Thank you very much for your fellowship, your friendship, and thanks for the invite. I must admit, hold on, let me just take this down. And I just want to say that, you know, alongside every ordinary man is a great woman. And in fact, she's more ahead than me. So, and I just want to acknowledge my wife because it's her birthday today. So, birthday to you. Stand up, Gretel. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Gretel. Happy birthday to you. She hates to be name-checked. She really does. So I've really pushed the boat out today, but I'm sure she'll forgive me just for this reason. But I thought long and hard about what I was going to say today. Really prayed on it. One of the reasons being, even though I've spoken at churches before, but I've never actually done it as a Caleb stream looking towards ordination. So this might be part of my assessment, I don't know. And that's given me so much of joy. When I was invited by Dan, it was one of the toughest times for me, for Gretel and the rest of the family, because my sister, my younger sister, my only sibling, was dying of cancer. She died just before Christmas. And, you know, when someone just gives you an intervention that just brings you out of that situation, and it just eased my heart. Because I was going through so much turmoil, because I was thinking, is there something I could have detected before she passed away? Could I have done something that prevented her from dying and she would really pull through, and she'd still be here today? But that intervention of Dan, just say, come and speak, gave such joy to me. And, you know, I know my sister's with the Lord. We gave her the best opportunity. She died at my house, our house, surrounded by the family. And we had a brilliant send-off just last month for her. And that intervention, I'm sure Dan didn't realize he was doing it, meant so much to me. And I just want to thank him and Kate for that. One of the things that's really inspired me through my career in the Met is a similar sort of intervention. And it's the intervention of Joseph of Arimathea. According to all the Gospels, he's a man who assumed responsibility for the burial of Jesus after the crucifixion. And the verse that really impacts me is Luke 23, 50 to 56. Would anyone like to read it out for me? Shall I read it? Okay. Now there was a man named Joseph, a member of the council, a good and upright man, who had not consented to the decision and action. He came from the Judean town of Arimathea, and he himself was waiting for the kingdom of God. Going to Pilate, he asked for Jesus' body. Then he took it down, wrapped it in linen cloth, and placed it in a tomb cut in the rock, one in which no one had yet been laid. It was preparation day, and the Sabbath was about to begin. The woman who had come with Jesus from Galilee followed Joseph and saw the tomb and how his body was laid in it. Then they went home and prepared spices and perfumes, but they rested on the Sabbath in obedience to the commandment. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Just break that down a bit. So a man named Joseph, Jewish town of Arimathea in the mountains. So he's a bit out of town, you know. So there was, I would think, a different mindset. And he was a good man. He lived the way of God wanted, and he was waiting on God's kingdom. And you think to yourself, the waiting, there was an expectation. So he was a follower of Jesus and a man of substance, a wealthy man, a member of the Jewish council, the Sanhedrin. But we've already heard, he did not agree when the other Jewish leaders decided to kill Jesus. In John 19:38, there is the strongest suggestion he was a disciple of Jesus, albeit one behind closed doors. He wasn't openly a disciple of the immediate 12. So maybe there's some fear, there's some apprehension. But in the end, he wasn't playing it safe. He was especially standing up for righteousness when he went to Pilate in verse 52 and asked for the body of Jesus. I suppose that's some personal risk. I suppose that's so many things we have to really look at on a day-to-day basis. How are we going to stand up for others, the living and the dead, to do the right thing? In James 1, 2-3, I'll paraphrase, but it talks about testing of your faith, building perseverance and determination. If there's anything I'm guilty of, I am so determined. If I've got something in mind and I believe it's the right thing and the Lord has laid out my heart, I'm like a dog with a bone. I just don't give up. I've got to keep going until I see it through. And he uses these trials to shape us, to be more Christ-like. In Job 23:10, it talks about, but he knows the ways that we take, and when he has tested us, we will come forth as gold. That's amazing. Going through those tests and those trials, it will shape us to come forth as a better person. So really, can we afford to play it safe? Can we afford to just coast and take things in our stride? Do we see the importance of stepping out for our fellow men and women and our children? You know, it was really great. The first thing this morning, we got a phone call from our grandchildren, and they were singing happy birthday to their grandma. And I was just thinking how their generation cannot afford to go through the injustices of my children's generation, my generation, and our parents' generation. We really can't. There's too many challenges because of how people look at other people, because of the color of their skin, their gender in some places, their faith or no faith, their lifestyle. We're in very turbulent times, and it's clear that we don't be vigilant and we don't step out, we can easily fall foul of being part of the problem. I suppose that's one of the things that drove me to become a police officer in the first place. I saw too many injustices as an officer. Even before I joined the Met in '83, I had to really navigate through the raindrops of where I could fall foul of the National Front, as it was then, and the police. Fortunately, during the Sus Law, there was so much sense of being under siege by the police if you're black. Black youngster growing up in London, in Islington, it was a tough one. In the 70s, you could be arrested on suspicion that you're about to commit an arrestable offense. So that meant they could read our minds. So we used to call them the thought police, amongst other things. And I just never could get my head around how so many people were actually criminalized by it because they were brought before the courts, some of them having done nothing, just been in the wrong place at the wrong time, and convicted. And I had a cousin of mine who told me that, you really need to be careful. And he himself got arrested 3 times, and the judge said, you come back one more time, you'll get a custodial sentence. And he had to go back to Jamaica. That shows you how challenging it was. So that's the backdrop in which I joined the police, as well as the fact that while that calling, which caught me on the blind side, I was a research scientist. I believed my call was science research for the rest of my career. I decided to join the police. And so many things had happened. If you want to know more, you'll have to come back tonight, and I'll give you a bit more of an in-depth view on that. But one of the things that really was the toughest thing was when I put in the application, my father was badly beaten up by cops over a traffic matter. He wasn't a troublemaker. He had a clean record. He'd never been arrested before, but they arrested him over some public order offense. Anyway, he successfully sued them for excessive force and unlawful arrest. But you can obviously see my dilemma of still stepping into the Met, joining the ranks of the officers who had beaten up my father. Was I being just to my dad? But that's where the Lord can take you. into the lion's den, into your worst nightmare. I was leaving a positive environment to then join a very strong, testosterone-driven, militaristic type of organization. But I still pushed through because I truly believe the Lord was there with me. He would not forsake me. Fortunately, I was able to really withstand the racism. I could stand up for myself, but one of the most hurtful things was what some of my colleagues were saying to other colleagues who are not as strong. And some people left because of the type of names being called. And then I used to see that happen with members of the public. That was the most hurtful thing for me. Fortunately, like-minded individuals, we formed the Black Police Association. And you'd think, well, there is the police union, the federation, but why do you need another organization? But we needed a platform to say, share what we have been going through in joining the organization and let our majority culture colleagues understand what was going through. So we had to step out. We had to call truth to power. We had to be very determined and clear and evidence-based so that no one could say we're just self-serving upstarts who just happen to want to do things for ourselves. I suppose that's what brings me to Joseph. He was not just thinking for himself, because he would have played it safe. And it really struck me in verse 53 when he went to, obviously Pilate has said he can have the body, and he then took it down, he wrapped it in linen cloth, placed it in a tomb cut in the rock, one in which no one had laid. So, I mean, that's the Rolls Royce of burials, really, isn't it? I mean, and it was actually foretold in Isaiah that we know Christ was going to be here as a man, and he would be crucified as if he was a criminal. But it's amazing that Joseph realized his role, and he gave him a brand new tomb, and he took a lot of real love for Jesus. And there's a book called The Way of the Cross, and it's very good for Lent, meditations of the death of Jesus. And there's a poem based on this part of Mark, and it just really touched my heart about how he just took a lot of love to prepare him and to clothe him. So he takes him into his arms, grief and love in his eyes, watched by exhausted, loving mother. He cleans the blood and dirt from the naked, battered, and lifeless body. He wraps him in strips of cloth and lays him down in a tomb, not for his own, but welcome after the excruciating pain and public humiliation that had gone before. It does go on. It's very touching. And I'm just thinking that sort of love to prepare, I suppose it lets me go back to my sister and ensuring that she was in the right place, she was looking good. You know, she did look good. And she was ready. And I suppose that sense of just giving of your time, it's just so amazing. So Joseph was assigned, and he grew into that role. And he was willing to take it forward. He was not holding back. I suppose one of the people you can really identify with now, even though he was killed in the late 60s, Martin Luther King. He was a person of such immense, iconic status in America. They even have Martin Luther King Day. And why? He was willing to put himself forward. He actually knew he was going to get killed because he's seen the mountaintop, and he would not be going there with you. But my eyes have seen the coming of the glory of the Lord. Amazing. But he has a quote. He says, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about what matters." So are we silent about what matters? Are we stepping by when we could make an intervention? Especially when we are moved to make that intervention. It's just like I was saying, how Dan just made that intervention in my life only a couple of months ago, and it really just stirred me. And here I am. So you never know how that step in time, that discerning power to say, yes, I need to do this. For yourself, your family, your fellowship, wider society, and of course, the next generation. It's so important that we don't walk on by. We don't just say, oh, I'll leave it to someone else. Justice delayed is justice denied. So we cannot allow ourselves to deny anyone. And racial justice is not just about being good to black people. Racial justice is about understanding that we have inequalities and we need to respond to that because it's part of the human condition. We are not great people. We are negative by nature. And we all fall short the mark. So there is that emphasis on that. We need to don't rest back and say, well, that's it. You know, I could have done that after 30 years in the Met. I could have been chilling out on a beach somewhere in Africa or the Caribbean or Asia, wherever. And here I am. I'm busier now than I was in the Met. Some people say you weren't busy enough in the Met. I think it's because I didn't see arrest as the only reason or the only option. I saw arresting someone as actually failure. I saw so many aspects of the pastoral element of policing as more important than blue lights and sirens and, you know, escalating a situation. I wanted to be a calming force. As it says in Matthew in the Beatitudes, blessed are the peacemakers, because they're sons and daughters of God. And that's what I saw was so important. So, ladies and gentlemen, in closing, I just want to say to you that there's a time for everything. As it says in Ecclesiastes 3:1-8. But the one that really resonates with me, in verse 8, there's a time to be silent and a time to speak out. As Joseph did, Joseph of Arimathea, how he spoke out to Pilate. let me have Jesus' body. He knew there was a time to speak, and he wasn't playing it safe. Sometimes it means you have to speak loud and proud. And don't in any way feel embarrassed by it. We need to speak out for our faith, for our fellowship, for our wider population. We need to speak with power, truth to power, especially if you're in a position of authority, in the corridors of power, in public or private organizations. You need to know when to speak. And don't allow that opportunity to go by. So I just feel that we just need to pray right now. Because we heard today about wanting to do something for our brothers and sisters in Syria. And we already know what's happening in Ukraine and the injustices there, and how we are so blessed. We're so blessed. It's embarrassing sometimes to know how fortunate we are. And we don't sometimes acknowledge it. This time last year, I would class myself as being in a wilderness period. I had to reset myself. And not for the first time. I realized I was not the person I wanted to be. I'm not the person that God wanted me to be. Even though I was doing great stuff out there, but inside, I was not really understanding the joy of the Lord in a way that I know He wanted me to take the steps that needed to be taken. And then came a chap called Nicky Gumbel. Has anyone been gumbled before? Do you know, when you get gumbled by Nicky, it is not just for one. He comes back at you. But praise God, and, you know, my wife being with me at a really important time and honoring the time we've had together. We've been married 40 years in May. And yeah, I must admit, Gretel's been doing most of the heavy lifting. But I just thank God for her and people like her who do the heavy lifting in a marriage. And that's how I realized, you know, you can run but you can't hide. You can't play it safe. And so that's why I'm going forward for Caleb's Stream. And it's got a bit of a ring to it, you know, from policing to priesthood, P2P. It might be the next book. But I just think we just need to pray in this. Could I ask you both to join me? Because there is such an unction in me about where we are. And as I said, Racial Justice Sunday and Racial Equality Week is a time just to reflect and understand, how do we do our bit? How do we really be on the right side of history? That really gets to me sometimes, especially when my grandson, who's 8, our oldest grandchild, and he says, "Granddad, what do you do? Were you a good police officer?" I said, "Judah, I really think I tried my best." But it's when those questions are being asked, you realize, are you doing it still? So that's what I would like us to pray about. And apologies if I've gone on too long.
Not at all. Not at all. No apologies needed. Thank you so much.